For people who are sitting in jail, in prison every day, it's hard to be thinking about what they're going to do with their life, how they're going to come home, why they're going to get into the job market. That's why I'm so grateful to people like Matt who've taken the time to get up early in the morning. Today is March the 11th, 2021. And I invited him to come onto our program so that we could work more toward teaching and inspiring more people in jail and prison. And Matt, I just want to thank you for being a part of the Prison Professors program.
Good morning, Michael. Thank you.
So where are you in the United States right now? What part of the country?
I'm up in northern New Jersey.
So northern New Jersey. No, I was in northern New Jersey. No, I was in central New Jersey for about 8 years of the 26 years that I served in prison. It was a good experience for me. I was in Fort Dix Federal Prison, always thinking that someday I'm going to have the opportunity to connect and interact with people like you who have achieved a high level of success in the business community. And you didn't do it by accident, I know. I know that you worked hard, and I think that there's a lot of people in prison that would like to hear, the pathway that you took. So would it be okay, Matt, as we discussed, if I just ask you questions about your journey and your background that has taken you from a young man to becoming a successful entrepreneur to eventually facing some challenges with the criminal justice system yourself?
Absolutely, Michael. Hopefully, I can provide some insight and be helpful.
Well, I know that you can be helpful. I mean, you've already been helpful to me just by agreeing to participate in this program. You're just volunteering because, like me, you care about the people inside and you want to do something to make things better. In fact, there was a mentor. I frequently speak about an inspiring figure to me was Gandhi, who said, we want to be the change that we want to see in the world. And that's what I'm trying to do, is try to be the change by helping people, inspiring people who are living in struggle. So Matt, you grew up in northern New Jersey. Tell us about your background. What kind of schools did you go to? What were your ambitions when you were a child?
So I live in northern New Jersey now, but I actually grew up in the suburbs of New York. Grew up with a large, nice family, 2 working parents, large, bunch of siblings. Grew up in a very nice blue collar community. Everyone was very close knit, very similar type of people around.
You say it was a blue collar community. Was there much of an emphasis there on education, or was it more about going into trades, or what was important? What were inspiring figures for you when you were growing up?
It was actually pretty interesting. Most of the adults that lived in the community happened to be firefighters or policemen from New York City who had moved out to the suburbs. And there certainly was a focus on education, explicitly with my father. He found it very important. We were Roman Catholic. He found it very important to have a Catholic education all through life. So me and my 4 siblings all went through Catholic education from kindergarten on through. And that was no easy feat for him on a policeman's salary.
Were you an altar boy?
I certainly was. I was, it's interesting. I liked being an altar boy. I took it very seriously, and it was the type of thing where, I was always a good worker. And even in that, I did such a good job. I used to get requested for weddings, and that became actually a moneymaker for me, because through the tips, I got requested for, I think it was 52 weddings. I did 52 weddings in 2 years.
That's awesome. I was not quite as disciplined as an altar boy. I remember failing the test 2 times. I think I was in the 2nd grade when I became an altar boy. Maybe it was the 1st grade. I went to a Catholic school, also St. John's, as a young boy, and just was never really one to follow rules. And of course that got me into some the crosshairs of trouble as I grew older. So I think that I start young, but you started young by finding a way not only to get the credentials that you needed to pass the test and become an altar boy, but also turn that into a biz dev opportunity. Did you?
It was interesting. It was always I was always looking for an opportunity to, get myself out of the house, get myself to do something, and whether it was youth sports doing that, or going to work early. And I always liked having my hands busy, and that was an avenue.
I think those are the pathway to success, is to be busy and focused and on some type of a goal. So that's one of the lessons that we really try to teach to people who are going through our programs in jails and prisons is to really be values-based, where we define success, but then also to really set clearly defined goals. You mentioned that you were an athlete as well. What kind of sports did you play?
Growing up, I played, everything from soccer, basketball, football. Then when I got to high school, I played just football and lacrosse. And I played that throughout high school, but lacrosse was always my real calling. And I ended up playing that, at a Division I college, and I got a scholarship. And it was a sport that, grabbed me, and it really shaped a big part of my life. I took it very seriously, and I loved it. I still do to this day.
And that's really an East Coast sport. Out here in California, that hasn't been as popular. I was surprised to learn more about it as I grew older and was incarcerated on the East Coast. I learned about lacrosse and how important it was as a sport out there. When you said that you went to a Division I college, tell us about your high school experience. Was that something you were thinking about from the time you were, in junior high or freshman in high school? You're saying, I want to go to a good college. Was that important to you?
It was interesting. The high school that I attended was a private Catholic school in New Jersey.
Which one?
Don Bosco Prep.
Okay.
In northern New Jersey. And I had cousins that had attended there. My older siblings went there, and I went there with a real sense of pride. All I ever wanted to do was go there. And I really dove in head first. I was full on in all the activities and the clubs, the sports. I became a Eucharistic minister there. So I took everything out of the school I could. I spent all my time there, and I made lifelong friends. And, that's ideally where my son will go. And, that type of thing. I met my wife there. So it really holds a lot of special memories. But at the same time, it instilled a lot of very strong characteristics about being empathetic to your brothers, learning how to take the right path to be successful, whether it was in sports or through those clubs or through the classroom. And
what did you aspire to become when you were in junior high or high school? What did you want to do with your life?
I was one of those rare animals that knew exactly what I wanted to do at an extremely young age. When I was very young, I wanted to be a priest. And then, when puberty came around or so, and I understood the sacrifices, I learned that wasn't the right path for me. So I knew I wanted to work in finance. I knew I wanted to be a bond trader.
At how old?
13.
So 13. Now, was it something like the Bonfire of the Vanities that inspired you, or what?
As cliche, Michael, as it sounds, it was certainly, my formative years were in the go-go 80s, right? And the Wall Street movies and the Bonfire of the Vanities and all of those types of, but it was more than that. I found there was a deep interest. I would read the business section, and, I liked not the action. I liked the fundamentals of the finance world, how companies grew through debt and, added jobs and things of that nature. And it was a real fundamental attraction of not just money or things of that nature. I felt like it would be something I'd be good at and have a natural interest.
So that's one of the great takeaways for anybody who's sitting in jail or prison, is to think, when you're wherever you are right now, be thinking about what it is that inspires you, because there are many leaders that teach us, if we love what we do, we really never work a day in our life. If we enjoy what we do, and what Matt's telling us is he understood, he liked finance. It intrigued him. Some people look at a mathematical equation and, they spin out of control and lose their way. And so that might not be the path for that person. But if you're sitting in a jail or a prison, it's a good idea to be reading and expanding your mind and looking for mentors and leaders. And that's why we try to profile them through these videos and through this program, to expose you to different career paths. And we're going to talk a little bit about what Matt meant when he said growing companies with debt, using bond, using debt versus equity. These are really interesting concepts that, whether you pursue a pathway in finance or not, just having an understanding of what that means is going to make you more valuable in the marketplace to employers and so on and so forth. So I'm going to dig a little bit deeper as we get into this interview about bonds so that maybe we can get a lesson on what it means to be a bond trader and how one might pursue a path in using debt to grow a business. Matt, but if you knew that you wanted to be a bond trader, how did that influence the courses that you studied both in junior high and in high school? Because you learned this relatively young. What courses did you think would relate to becoming a bond trader?
So it was interesting. The high school I attended, what was nice is there was a certain flexibility in the curriculum and the courses that you were allowed to select. And I was able to, wean off some of the history and things of that nature that I found a little bit more opaque for me and take economics 1, economics 2, accounting 1, accounting 2 in high school. And these are some of the fundamental building blocks of the finance and economic system. And I found myself, going back to your other point of, find something of interest, something that has a natural curiosity for you. Those classes weren't work for me. I enjoyed studying them. I was an active participant in those classes. It was a two-way street, where in some of the other classes, it was more like pulling teeth. So going back to the point of, finding a work experience that, generates, a passion or drive in you. It doesn't have to be the highest of highs. It doesn't matter what industry it is. It's just making sure that you're willing to get up to work every day and be positive.
So you studied some basic skills like math and accounting.
Right.
Did you perform well in those disciplines?
I did. And it was the type of, it was because it's very tangible. You have they'll work through a case study or an example. You have a store that sells automotive tires, and the sales for this month or this number, and you had to pay your employees and rent. It was very tangible. You could see what the goal was. You're trying to sell more than your expenses, and then from there you can hire more people, maybe add more stores and things of that nature.
And the nice thing about developing that skill is every single business in America needs somebody who can keep books or do accounting and understand how to categorize both expenses and income and all of the other nuances of that. I am somebody who learned everything when I was in prison and have come home, and I've built a number of businesses. I can tell you that that's the challenge for me is really understanding how to really get granular with a profit and loss statement or a balance sheet and categorize my business in different ways. So for an example, sometimes we take revenues in, but I don't have the expense for several months. And so I have a large amount of money in my bank account, but I know that's really not all my money because I have to fulfill the order, but I'm just not gonna have to pay it out for a couple of months. That's something that I would need somebody like Matt to help me organize. So if you're sitting in a jail or a prison and you're thinking about the job market that's waiting for you, I can tell you if you develop that skill, which you can do on your own through independent study because it's objective. You go through an exercise, you figure it out. Either you got the answer wrong or right. And if you got it wrong, it's going to tell you got it wrong because you've got to balance those books. So,
Michael, if I could add on, I fully agree. If you can take a remedial accounting course or something that's an introduction to that area, not only, there's always going to be a demand for, like you say, bookkeepers and people to keep the numbers straight, but it's also a very creative skill to understand what the end goal of a business is, and whether that's a hamburger restaurant or a multi-million-dollar company. If you're an employee there and you understand what is the goal of the boss or the people that own it, and it'll help you align and it'll make it more fruitful for you to be a better asset to the company.
One lesson that we can always learn from leaders is if we just dissect their story. And you notice I haven't gotten to the bond trading yet. I am trying to dissect it for you to show you the little incremental steps that he took to reach his passion. He didn't start off and read Bonfire of the Vanities and hear this concept of Masters of the Universe and say, oh, I'm going to be a bond trader and make 7 figures a year. He said, no, first I have to learn math, arithmetic, division. Then I have to learn accounting, then maybe some algebra and word problems. And all of that gives him a more facility to use critical thinking skills. So when there's a problem, he can think it through. Where else does he develop that? He spoke about being an athlete. You've got to learn a position. You have to learn how to work with a team. You have to work towards a goal. And all of that makes somebody a more well-rounded person of value. That is what brings, that's what's going to help a person overcome the challenges and the stigma of a criminal conviction. And the more you think about it, the more you learn, the more you are going to position yourself to overcome that struggle. And I just want to thank you, Matt. I know that you could be with your family right now and you're spending time with us. So let's continue here. So you've learned these skills in high school. You went through the basic classes, and then you said you went to a Division I college. What does that mean, a Division I college, for those in our audience that aren't as familiar with the academic journey?
Sure. So, when classifying, the Division I is a label that is attributed to the sports classification of a university or college. And depending on the number of sports teams they have and the size of it, you're either Division I, II, or III. Division I is the most competitive of the sports areas, where a lot of the sports teams you all probably know are mostly Division I. The California, Cal State, or the University of Texas, or whatever, University of Florida. I went to a school in Philadelphia by the name of St. Joseph's, and that was a Division I lacrosse program, and I got a scholarship there and started playing there when I was a freshman.
And you studied there. What did you study there? Finance, business, accounting?
I studied accounting and marketing, and then finished with a finance degree. It was very interesting. Going to college was a unique experience for me because, I've never been away from home, these types of things, but the lacrosse was really a helpful step for me. It was able to build in some structure into my daily day. We had practices every day at 6 a.m., no matter what. And, you had to get up in that cold Philadelphia weather and you had to be, helmet on by 6 a.m. So that being part of a team, being able, continue to work hard, because you weren't ensured a spot on the team every year. You had to continue to work at it. That really helped me.
So another important lesson there, success really isn't a journey. It's something you got to pursue every day. And that's why you have to have that solid amount of discipline, getting up and being on the field at 6 a.m, rain or shine, cold or hot, you got to do it. I heard Matt talk about 2 disciplines as well that I want to point out, because if you're in jail or prison, you develop these skills, you broaden your prospects for success. One of them was accounting, and accounting is a licensed profession. Isn't that right? To become an accountant, you have to develop a license to reach the highest potential.
You have to become a certified public accountant, correct?
That's the goal, would become a certified public accountant. And then you can really, your opportunities open a lot. And for somebody with a felony background, I'm going to say, as somebody who has a lot of experience in working with formerly incarcerated people, you can overcome that barrier. It's not easy to do, but you can. But he gave us another discipline, which we've spoken about with other people. And I really like to talk about that one, and that's marketing. That's another subject that any business needs, and anybody in jail or prison can develop that skill. So what would be helpful, I think, Matt, right now is for you to help our audience understand, what does marketing mean from your perspective?
I think marketing in a very, base sense is understanding the value in either your product or your service, and the best way you can facilitate that information to potential customers. And you need to take a lot of factors into account: people's general interest, the amount of time they're going to spend to look at your product, look at the potential for acquiring your product or service, and being it's really just honing in on the value of what you have and how can you quickly put that with a potential customer, make it hit home.
Yeah. And now let me just try to give an example, a real life. So here's a book. And some of you may have known, I may have sent this book into your prison. This is written by a former partner of mine who was in prison, and he was a bank robber. Now he's a lawyer and a professor of law at Georgetown. And here's his book. And I produced this book for Sean. His name is Sean Hopwood, and you've probably seen me do videos of him before. But this book has some marketing concepts. You might wonder, what is it? Well, everything is marketing. It's the title, the font, the color. It's his branding. It's his story. And what does that take to accomplish these things? And even to write and produce the book, it takes something that you could do whether you're in jail, in prison, or at home. You've got to develop a couple of basic skills. Just like with accounting, it was math. It was learning how to categorize numbers. To be a marketer, the only thing you need to become really skilled at: English, putting words into sentences and sentences into paragraphs; art, having some concept of how to use images to convey a message; and critical thinking. How do you connect with your customers? How do your customers, who don't have any idea who you are or what you do, get an idea from something that's tangible so they'll pick up and pay $25 to buy this? How does that happen? That's what marketing is. And it doesn't matter if you're a landscaping company, a mechanic, a carpenter, a manufacturer of furniture, a bond trader. You're always going to be marketing yourself. So if you're in jail or prison, I really urge you, take these lessons that Matt just gave us and apply them to your life. Get up early. Be disciplined. Choose the small incremental steps to get to where you want to go, and just be persistent. That's what it takes in sports. That's what it takes in business. And start with a really good grasp of what you're living through. You're incarcerated, and you're going to be formally incarcerated. People are going to judge you. Don't cry about it. That's the world in which we live. Figure out how you're going to overcome it. And Matt, I'd love it if you told our audience how you broke through being one of 100,000 college graduates to go on to build your career. Walk us through that path.
It was, I think this is a very fair question. And coming out of, university, it's not always a scenario or environment where people are just throwing jobs at you, especially if you're coming from a smaller, not as prestigious situation, whether it's a smaller college or from being incarcerated. You need to find that first step. And for me, my position was I needed to learn a little bit more before I really went for the my ultimate goal. So I was able to take a job at a company called Fitch, which is a credit rating agency, which is a peer to S&P and Moody's, which I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that, but they rate bonds. They tell people what the value of bonds are. So they do fundamental. Yes.
So good. Let's before we get there, let's talk about those three. You said Fitch, Moody's, and S&P, and they are accreditation agencies and measuring agencies. Is that what you said?
Yes, they're credit rating agencies, and they ascribe ratings to various types of debt instruments. It basically tells you the probability of being paid back, what the entity's ability to pay back the debt.
So how that relates to the lessons through which you may be going through if you're going through one of our courses is we have a specific course on accountability. and holding yourself accountable. Sometimes you can hold yourself accountable, but sometimes the world is going to look at the credentials that you've built. When he's talking about accrediting agencies, he's effectively saying this is the way of the world. Everybody is going to be looking at accountability metrics. As a bond trader, he is looking, what does Moody's say about the ability of this company to pay me back? I want you to understand, when you go into the job market, that's what people are going to be looking at you. They may not have an official accrediting agency that says, oh, this guy did this much time in prison, he's going to make it or he's not going to make it. But every human being is going to use some type of accountability tool to make an assessment. And you've got to be marketing yourself right now, thinking about how am I going to enhance my marketability? That's what all these companies are going to try to do. How do I get an A+ rating from one of these bond rating agencies? You've got to be thinking today the same thing about you, because you've got to be the CEO of your life and you've got obstacles ahead of you. Figure out how to overcome them. And the sooner you start, the better. Now, I want to continue again between Moody's, S&P, and Fitch, where you got hired.
Right. So what the one thing I've learned in life, and I think the two situations that are really clearly have helped me is, if you're going to take an avenue towards something, you want to learn every single thing you possibly can about that one specific thing. So for me, it was two-pronged. At Fitch, I was able to learn all the credit metrics, all the fundamental analysis you needed to do to learn how to qualify if a company or entity is, accomplished enough to be able to pay back their debt. So it's learning the granular building blocks of this sort of industry to have the fundamental view if company is good or bad. Later in my career, I was given an opportunity to learn how the bonds were created, how they went from buyer to seller, all of the pipes in the system. So I was able to learn a 360 degree view of this market. Not only how to look at a company and understand whether it's valuable or not, and they can pay back their debt. At the same time, I learned the back end of the systems, where I could tell you how a trade goes through, how, an investment is placed into an account, and vice versa. So it gave me a certain amount of, credibility to, not only explain the intrinsic value of these investments or such, but also how things can move around, how these investments can move around, and how the sausage is made.
Could you, what would be helpful, I think, for people that don't have as much understanding of how the business world works, could you give us your assessment of the difference between debt and equity? What are the differences between those two concepts in business?
No problem. So debt is a loan, right? So if you would like to buy a house, this is always a good analogy. To buy a house for $300,000, it's very rare that people have $300,000 in cash in the bank. So what you're able to do is if you were to go to a bank and ask for a loan or a mortgage, the debt is, that would be the mortgage. Let's say they gave you $250,000, that is the debt portion. They want you to come up with $50,000, and that's the equity portion. As time goes on, you repay the mortgage, the equity portion, your ownership goes higher, the debt portion goes lower, and that is the ultimate goal. So in 10 years' time, now you own, let's say, half of the house, $150,000, and you only owe $150,000. And it's a way of growing your asset base through small, tiny steps, while being able to live in a home that you initially couldn't live in because of the large price tag. The same thing is true of any corporation out there. for all, if they need to buy a warehouse, they need to buy a tractor, they need to buy just new machinery or hire new people. It's not always feasible just to do it with the cash in their bank. So they borrow money through bonds and loans. And the equity of the company is what they own. But ideally, after time, as they pay the debt down, the equity side grows and the debt side shrinks. So it's very similar to the house analogy.
And it's very similar to the building of a human life. Life is, we build equity and value in our life by taking incremental steps. You start with something, you build upon it, you grow in value, new opportunities open, and that's something that you can be doing right now. You can build value in your life by being really disciplined and deliberate about the books that you read, about the way that you spend your time, about the activities you pursue, the disciplines you try to master. All of that is either going to open opportunities for you to prosper when you come home, or it's going to keep you on this pathway that really complicates life for so many people in prison, where the longer we expose somebody to corrections, the less likely that person is to function as a successful human being in society. So we really encourage you to learn as much as you can, as soon as you can, knowing that, as he just talked about, an incremental step. It's not you want a house and you own a house. It's you take these little steps. If you want to become successful in your life, think about a 10-year plan. If you know where you want to be in 10 years, what can you do in the next 3 months to advance new opportunities that wouldn't have opened to you had you not taken them? So Matt, I know that we're kind of the final closing section, 15 minutes or so of our time together. What was it that led you into some challenges with the justice system?
So for me, Michael, it was, I had a very nice home life. I have, loving wife and healthy, happy children. Things came to a needle point some years down the road. I had opened my own business to be closer to home and not have to go into New York City every day. And I thought that would be a healthier option. And it's one of those things where in my personal life, I had, within a very short window of time, within like a 2-month window, 3 very large problems happened. My best friend in the world, we were each other's, I was best man. He died of an overdose, and that really shook me to the core. A week later, my father was diagnosed with, terminal cancer, and that was just really challenging. And at the same times, I had some personal, money was getting, it was getting tight personally. Some loans were coming due and things of that nature. And it was really at a very acute, very tight, very acute timetable. And I struggled with it. And instead of opening up and asking for help from peers, from my family, to, just other colleagues, I thought of a bad route to take, where I saw a way of getting money quickly. And it was, from my knowledge of this, finance market. I thought it was in a way I wouldn't hurt people. I was delusioning myself, thinking there would be no, victims. I made the decision in a very rash fashion. And once it started, it snowballed. It's that old adage that your parents used to say, that a lie begets a lie. Once you get into one lie, you find yourself in a perpetual cycle of having to cover it. And that's what happened to me. The initial decision, it's my fault. It's, no one else's. And my thought that it was going to be victimless was, inaccurate. And, there was many victims, including my family and, the people that I've hurt. But that's sort of how it came about. It was being able to, I saw a short avenue with that I thought would be a bigger Band-Aid without rippling the waters too much. And it was just a bad decision all around.
I think a lot of people in our audience can appreciate what you just described, because a lot of them have gone through it also. They've been doing one thing in their life, and then life happens. Something happens, and they make a decision that they later regret. The key to, I think, restoring our confidence and getting back on track is doing what you just did. And that is really owning and accepting responsibility and saying, okay, I can't change the past. I'm here. I need to do something about it and start making amends and reconciling with society and understanding I have to live in the world as it exists. And the sooner somebody starts to do that, the more capable that person becomes in overcoming the struggle. As somebody who's gone through it, Matt, I can say that, it's very difficult to be in this downward spiral where you're waiting for a judge or a warden or a probation officer or somebody who's got, they're pulling all the strings in your life. But the reality, as I experienced, is that we can all make a decision at any given time on what we're going to do about it. And we have to understand this concept that I like to use when I teach sometimes. I talk about this concept of planting an oak tree. Maybe you've heard this maybe before, Matt. Do you know the best time of year to plant an oak tree?
In the fall? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a good guess. A lot of us have to guess. When we ask that question any place, you'll be surprised at the answers. Fall, summer, spring, morning, noon, on a Saturday. But here's what I learned from some wise people is that the best time to plant an oak tree is 20 years ago. Right?
That's pretty good.
But the second best time is today. And if you want to build an oak tree, if you want to build a life of stability, think about that. It would have been great if 20 years ago we had these tools and tactics and resources in place that would help us build our life.
Right.
But maybe we did in many areas. I mean, you certainly did, Matt. You were an athlete, you were a good student, you were an altar boy, you were a disciplined career path before going to launch your own company. You went to really learn the nitty-gritty about the trade by working for one of the big agencies. You took those incremental paths, but something happened. That's life. So now it's time to plant the next seed to grow our oak tree. But I'm going to ask you another little question from anatomy, or botany, rather, all these disciplines. So from botany. So when we plant a seed, Matt, is that going to be everything we have to do? If we want to grow a great oak tree, we plant a seed. Is that all we have to do, is just plant it and walk away?
No, it needs water and sunlight, and it needs tending.
It needs tending, and it needs to be fed, right? You need to nurture it with more things in. And what do you generally nurture a seed with? What is it like? What do we put on the dirt after we've planted a seed?
Fertilizer, soil, yeah.
Right, fertilizer. Do you know what fertilizer is? Like, what's a common fertilizer? What are the origins of fertilizer?
I'm thinking dung, but
yeah, it's okay. We can say it. It's crap.
Right.
it's just livestock, crap. And so, I'm using crap instead of a word that starts with an S because some jails don't like that profanity, but I think crap we can get it through. So let's just kind of put some optics on that, right? You plant a seed, you put crap on top of it, but the seed has to grow through the crap before it becomes a tree. So if you want to get through your struggle, just prepare your mind to know you got to grow through a lot of crap first. And that's all that we're doing. And that's part of the journey of life, is that we face a challenge. We look to leaders like Matt and we say, what lessons can we learn? And I've learned a lot from him today, and I hope that you have as well. And if you go more than just watching the video, you're going to see that we've taken the time with Matt's help to write out a lesson plan that you can use to accomplish these goals that we teach in all of our classes. the importance of developing stronger critical thinking skills. And some examples of Matt doing that was when he was 13, he knew he wanted to become something in finance. And so critical thinking skills, he decided, gee, when I'm taking courses, should I study history? Should I study candle making? Should I study carpentry or math and accounting? And I think he used this critical thing and said, well, all of those probably have value, but to reach my goal, I've got to pursue the math and accounting. Think about that for yourself. That's all that critical thinking is. Every decision we make comes with an opportunity cost. And we encourage you to use your time where you are right now in a manner that is going to help you get the best possible outcome. And Matt, as you're waiting for this process to unfold, I just want to thank you for helping me both develop the course and share your story. But what is success for you now? What seeds are we planting for the rest of your life? What would you like to see happen when you get to the other side of this journey?
So, it's been pretty interesting over the past, say, 10 years. I've taken a sort of informal interest in marketing again, sort of going back to what I had learned in university. I had continued to work in finance, but because of the legal troubles I'm in now, and because I don't think finance was a healthy environment for me, I'm pivoting. And so I'm working for a company now that builds roadside digital billboards locally. And what we do is if you could picture a digital, the high rise, rectangle billboard, and they rotate through, we sell the ad space to local small businesses, but it's an all-in-one. So we sell the ad space, but at the same time, we'll help the little company develop the ad, help them create a website that, is maybe a little bit more eye-catching. And this has really been fruitful. So this is the type of thing, ideally, I like talking to people. I like using my brain. I understand their fundamental businesses usually and what they're trying to accomplish. And I think I have a creative way of catching people's attention. So I'm really putting my shoulder behind that, Michael, as a way of rebuilding my life, planting that seed, as you would say. And, it's something, A, I think I'll be good at. B, I think, it makes me feel good. And it's an honest buck.
Let me ask you a question there on that. Is this a startup concept, or is this something you're doing right now? Are you in that space right now?
Correct. Yes.
So you're going and you're approaching customers, and you're using all the skills that you've developed: reading, writing, communications, ideas of how to capture a prospect's attention, and convincing a business owner the value of doing this. Are you doing that right now?
Yes, Michael. And
I want to ask you a question on that. When you go out and you speak with those guys, how many of them ask you about your criminal background?
It's yet to come up.
Great point. That's the key salient point that I thought you were going to say, and I want people in jail and prison to understand. If you can bring value to a company, if you can go to that company and say, I've got a skill set, I've got a product, I'm going to help your business grow, guess what the business owner is going to say? Where do I sign? He's not going to say, fill out an application and check out if you've got a felony and then not call you back.
You know what, Michael, it's actually pretty interesting. I think that's a very strong point. I think if someone were to ask, you need to have a strong, honest answer and explain, what the scenario is. But like I said, it hasn't come up. And what's that? There's a psychological term. I don't know if it's a mirror effect or, if you're at a dance, okay, and you're dancing, you're thinking, the human anatomy thinks everyone's looking at me, and do I look foolish or whatever it might be. But the truth of the matter is no one's looking at you. Everyone's having the same thought. Hey, is everyone looking at me? People are more concerned about their own interests innately. So if you're walking in and you're trying to get a job or help someone out, or, if you're going to be value added, you're going to be a hard worker, you're going to be honest and straightforward and put your shoulder into it. That's what they're worried. They're worried about how you're going to help them.
What's in it for me?
What's in it for me in a healthy way. So once you understand that that's human nature, and you can sort of, get over yourself, for lack of a better term, I think it'll make you feel a lot healthier and better, and, allow you to move forward.
Well, I can really say thank you for giving us that insight. One of the things that you've always hear me say is I never ask anybody to do anything that I am not doing. And I am learning from Matt even today. Even I've been out of jail now for 7.5 years. And yet every day I look for an opportunity to find a leader, to learn from a leader, and to try and mirror his activities. And you'll see I'm creating words. I'm trying to develop my communication skills. I'm trying to develop my skill set so that I can bring value in my business and into the people that I serve. And right now, I want to serve you. If you're sitting inside of a jail or a prison, I want to help you realize that you are not defined by the worst decisions you've made in your life. You are defined by what you're doing right now. And if you follow Matt's leadership, you're going to be very deliberate about the books that you read, the activities you pursue, the skills that you develop, knowing that either you're going to come back to society and fill out job applications and never get responses from those prospective employers, or you're going to say, no, I'm going to reinvent myself, get up early, and to use his analogy, put my shoulder into it and make something happen. And that's what we want you to do. Make something happen with your life. Don't cry about the world as it exists. Figure out how to succeed anyway. And that's why Matt is a leader and a mastermind. And I'm just so grateful to you for sharing your story, giving us an hour of your time when you could be doing anything else. And it's just a pure voluntary effort on his part. And I'm super grateful.
Michael, thank you for the time. I hope, if any of this was helpful, I hope inspired someone in the smallest bit, but thank you for your time as well. And
well, I can tell you can continue helping as you continue growing. You've got a lot of lessons to that you could dispense and use and teach. And if you have an opportunity to create a course or write something and you feel inspired to do that going forward, we will always welcome your contributions, and I will distribute them to people in jails and prisons across America. That's our commitment at Prison Professors. And we just want to thank you for being a part of our community. If you're watching this on YouTube because your family member's in prison, we hope that you will subscribe to the program. Most of our audience are people that are locked in confinement in jails and prisons across America. And we just want you to know that we believe in you, and we want to help you build a better pathway so that you come back as a law-abiding citizen with your dignity intact and opportunities to carve your new pathway. So thank you so much, Matt.
Thank you, Michael. Have a nice day.
You as well.